straight from the mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Hello everyone and welcome to Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Hello there, Matt. How's your poetry going this week?
Very good, thank you very much, in my opinion. So
outstanding. Because I hear that you went out and did a little bit more poetry during the week. Is this correct?
I do it as often as I can. I don't do it as often as I used to. I used to go to, I think I had about 8 different aged care facilities to do every month in days gone by when I had a little bit more time on my hands. I don't have quite that amount of time now.
It's a full-time job almost.
Just about, that's right.
Unreal. And
what I loved about this one was at Maryvale House in Wellington, and so I tend to do fewer aged care facilities now, and typically about every second month, not every month. But one of the ladies in the audience there remembered me from when I did some poetry in Gaol a few years ago, which was some poetry I was asked to go and do at the Henry Lawson Museum.
Right.
It was a group of teachers that were the first teachers that went through the Mitchell College of Advanced Education, now known as CSU in Bathurst. So they were the very first cohort that ever went through as teachers.
Right.
And they were on a reunion weekend.
Yeah.
And part of that reunion weekend had them in a bus going around to places like Golgong. So they thought it'd be nice to come along and do some poetry there. So she got up. She was not, it doesn't normally happen that they nominate someone to do a thank you, but she in particular wanted to thank me.
Yep.
I think her thank you went almost as long as my poetry went.
That's nice.
But she talked about that, and they've got a little poetry group there at Maryvale House where they
lovely.
go and look for different poems and read poems. They wanted some of my poems and wanted me to send some for them to read in their poetry group. So it was quite nice, but I just still think there's that love of poetry maybe with some of the slightly older generations. Younger generations probably don't realise that it is poetry when they're singing songs. It's just music along for the ride.
Yeah.
Obviously, poetry many years ago probably was spoken a lot more rather than just rare occasions.
Absolutely. I've got my little story on that one. I can sort of share with the listeners as well in regards to that. When I was a young bloke, my Saturdays in particular, I suppose, the old misspent youth days of going around all over the countryside in New South Wales with my father and my uncle, bookmaking. So my uncle was a bookmaker, so I used to go around as a young fella and share those experiences with them. But the thing I remember most about all of that was sitting in the car. My uncle was a massive fan of poetry. C.J. Dennis in particular was a big fan of, Banjo Patterson, Henry Lawson, those sort of ones. And he would recite all of these different poems for us. And you're exactly right. Like, he's long past these days, of course, but that generation, they had something specially connected to the Australian poets in particular.
And you might have people on a road trip now who might sing songs, but again, that's just memorising words in typically a poetry form in a song format. So it's probably just a bit different now, but it's still poetry. So for some reason, there is some attraction in my mind to the cleverness around the rhyming that you've got. It's so structured, and you've got to fit into that structure and keep the rhyming of it and still deliver a message. So I am attracted to that. But again, I suppose people are attracted to songs as well, and that's the same sort of thing.
That's exactly right. Well, well done, mate. Congratulations on another successful poetry recital. Now let's jump straight into today. Council meeting. During the week, there was another council meeting being held, and I just want to talk about the very first one because we've raised it on a number of occasions on a few previous podcasts. Australia Day ceremonies. Now, this has created a fair bit of controversy, the potential form of discussion that took place there last Thursday night. It even got a mention through national media with people like Warren Mundine sort of chimed in for his commentary in regards to it as well. There's been a fair bit of commentary through social media in regards to it as well. So the decision was made last Thursday night in regards to what day we will run our Australia Day ceremonies. What happened?
Well, there was a fair bit of discussion, and it certainly went back and forth and good discussion. Obviously, I do enjoy council meetings where you do get people to have the chance to have their say and just basically work through a process to finally get to an outcome. As part of that whole discussion, we had 2 separate decisions to make effectively. The committees, you may remember, made a recommendation to council that said Friday night, the 24th of January should be the Wellington event, and Saturday night, the 25th of January, should be the Dubbo event. And we did say to people, please send your feedback through, talk to councillors, ring them, send them an email, send them a text message. And we got a few, we weren't inundated by any stretch of the imagination, but we certainly had a few people who contacted us.
There was a bit of public commentary, though, wasn't there, surrounding it?
I'm not sure if there was that much public commentary. I tend not to get on the various pile on council social
Certainly
media sites.
What I saw through there, and generally even just in discussion with other people, certainly people knew about the upcoming discussion was going to be had.
Yeah, so and that's good. That's obviously what we want. We want people to be aware of these decisions, and that's where that committee structure, again, 2 weeks beforehand, and maybe councillors at that committee meeting, when they put forward the idea there and voted on that, maybe some of them were thinking, well, let's make it a bit different and just see where we go. When it got to the discussion at the council meeting, then some of the discussion was around Wellington, do it as a twilight event or do it on the day. And the general discussion seemed to be, we've made a bold and courageous decision a couple of years ago to take the Wellington event to a twilight event. And it felt like, again, some of the discussion at the council meeting felt like it would be a backward step to go back to having Australia Day in Wellington on the Sunday. So that was the first vote we had, which was in relation to Wellington. Voted to go 6:30 p.m. on the 25th of January, a twilight event, as we've done the last 2 years. Keeping in mind that, of course, the Australian Citizenship Ceremonies Code has changed, as we've talked about before.
Absolutely.
We've got a window of 3 days before or 3 days after or the day of. So that was a decision made back in December 2022. So we made the decision on Wellington. That was done. Then it moved on to Dubbo. And again, a lot of discussion around different ideas there. Some of the discussion was potentially looking at the Saturday night as well for Dubbo, keeping in mind that that would cause somewhat of an issue, not a major issue, but you've got 2 events you're trying to run at the same time. You've got staff trying to run those 2 events, and you've also got councillors trying to be at both events. So in the end, councillors voted, and the vote went that we would have the Dubbo ceremony on the Sunday, 8 a.m. on the Sunday, the same as we've done effective the last 2 years. So basically what we started or what we changed for 2022, twilight event Wellington, the day of in Dubbo. We did that again in first time we did that, 2023. So we did that for 2023 and made the decision at the end of 2022. But basically, 2023, that was the first time we did that. We stayed with that way for this year, and we'll stay with that way again for next year. And keep in mind that Australia Day next year is on a Sunday, so you'll have that Saturday, Sunday, Monday long weekend.
Which is interesting because I think I actually thought it may well have gone the other way, in the sense that I thought, particularly based upon there was a planning meeting, wasn't it? Prior to what was the meeting that was held?
The committee meeting.
The committee meeting was held.
Meeting,
the standing committee meeting was held, and there was a decision at that point in time that it was about a 5-4 sort of vote, wasn't it? Then that you were going to look towards going.
It was a pretty
the
tight
24th
vote.
and 25th.
Yeah, it was actually 3-3 at that committee meeting. We had a few councillors away from that particular meeting, and that
Right.
skewed a little bit as well. We only had 6 councillors at that standing committee meeting,
Yep.
so we would obviously have hopefully 10, and we did have 10 at the council meeting. So there's 4 different votes straight away, but those 6 that were there as well could hear that feedback from the community during that time. So it was always going to be tight based on the fact that it was 3-3 at the committee meeting. So yeah, look, I think, again, the debate's been had, the discussion's been had, it's highlighted in the community, and for the moment, we've stayed that way. There might be some changes from the federal government. There might be some changes that happen in terms of just in the environment, in the community in general, but at the moment, twilight event in Wellington, the day of in Dubbo for 2025.
Do you feel as though there is any sense of wanting to change the celebration day, or the day that we have the Australia Day ceremony? Do you feel within our community at all that there is any sense that we want to make this as a change, or is this something that just seems to be ingrained within our community as being this? We don't want to be that group that sort of starts to put ourselves forward in making the change. Yeah,
well, we don't have the power to do it from a council perspective, but I don't really get the feeling the community wants to change the day. And
not actually the day, but the day of the celebration.
Yeah, the ceremony. So I think the feedback that we received as councillors was more in line with keeping the ceremony on the 26th. So that certainly seemed to be the majority of the feedback from the community. So I suspect that that's part of the decision-making process for councillors as well, hearing that community feedback. So I don't think councillors were that keen on it. And I think in Wellington they've been okay with it. And so let's keep it that way. Maybe in a few years' time that might change again. There might be some more changes. Obviously, the federal government, in terms of making the change that they made back in 2022, the federal government is signalling that it's acceptable for councils, because it wasn't acceptable before, it's acceptable for councils to have that celebration on a different day. So that's certainly interesting.
It is actually, and that's actually something too I'd like to sort of very briefly talk about, that in my discussion with a number of people in the community, they felt at the time that this was something that Dubbo Regional Council was doing outside of the guidelines almost of what other council groups do. And I had to sort of say to them at the time, say, no, this is a decision that the federal government has made to allow councils like Dubbo Regional Council to have the celebrations 3 days before or 3 days after, or actually on the day of the 26th. Every single person I spoke to had no idea that this was the case, that the federal government had made this change. What's your take on that, mate? Do you feel as though that the federal government should be coming more vocal in regards to this, or is this just the way the federal government sort of operates?
It is hard to get information out there. I don't think the federal government made a song and dance about it, but it was certainly communicated at the time. We're going back to 2022 now. And because councils are charged with the responsibility of hosting these ceremonies, and that's one thing I think that some people have been confused about. Some people have said, why is council wasting their time on this? They should be doing things like fixing the potholes. But this is one of the things. There are lots of responsibilities that local government has, and this is one of them, is to actually host the event, whatever event that event looks like, host the event for Australia Day, including a citizenship event if you've got people who are going to be conferred. One of the things that we do at local government is we do the conferring of citizenship on new citizens that come. There's a lot of steps I've had to go through before that final step, but the final step is, yes, you go to your local council and a citizenship ceremony. We talk about them often, and that's the final step in that process. So we are involved and we are charged with that responsibility. I think the federal government making that change was always about letting councils do what they thought was the right thing to do. And during the debate, it was interesting. One of the comments was made, well, we should just leave it on the 26th. If there's going to be any change, the federal government will make that change and then we'll take notice. And the response from someone else in the debate was, well, the federal government has made that change.
That's right, absolutely.
They've actually said you can have it on days outside that. Not compulsory, but you can have it on days outside that. So it's hard for the community to know about every change that every government makes. It only really becomes an issue when they are impacted by it or when it affects them or when they become interested in it. And this debate made people take notice and are interested in it.
It certainly did. And I think the situation there with the Warren Mundine comment, when he came forward publicly during the week and made quite a scathing comment directed at Dubbo Regional Council about even wanting to think about wanting to change the celebration day. That to me, I felt put a lot of pressure then on council in regards to the type of decision that they would then have to make on Thursday night. It also sort of showed me too the fact that the federal government's very, very quiet in regards to this. There was an opportunity there for someone from the federal government to have maybe even got in contact with the council and say, hey, listen, there's been a fair bit of public commentary in regards to this sort of stuff. The decision you're going to make on Thursday night, you got full backing of us to make whatever call you want to make. I must admit, when I heard him make that comment, and look, he's a reasonable guy, but I felt that put a lot of pressure then on council in regards to what happened on Thursday night. Not saying I would have gone either way in the debate. I don't know which way I would have gone because I'm not the person sitting in the chair making a decision. But it's the public commentary surrounding that, to me, I just felt it became very unfair on the councillors who were put in a very difficult situation then on Thursday night to feel as though they had to then go a certain way with their decision. That's just my personal take.
Yeah, and look, again, public commentary, that's what happens. You're on council, you make decisions. I think we've said it before, if you don't want to be involved in anything controversial, you don't want to have criticism, then you just don't change anything. And then we look 10 years back and go, wow, we haven't changed anything. We've been very uncontroversial, but we're so far behind the rest of society now. So you've got to make change if you want to keep up or stay ahead of the rest of society. I don't know that those comments from Warren made any difference to the decision-making process. Again, I can never talk about what goes on inside the head of each councillor, but it certainly wasn't something that we discussed or talked about amongst councillors. Warren was on council before I was even on council, so it goes back a long time. I don't remember exactly, but I suspect he was on council from 1999 to 2004. Maybe he was on before 1999, but I'm sure he was on that last council group before I got elected in 2004. So he's been out of the loop for some time. I'm not sure why Warren made the comments he made. That was his opinion, I suppose. So,
well, particularly with the fact it's a federal government initiative that gives council the opportunity and the right to make whatever call they want to make. And so therefore to turn around and to publicly admonish a council for even contemplating wanting to make a change in decision for a guy who knows and understands federal politics, I just thought it just seemed, personally I felt it seemed quite rude, to be honest. That was just my take. In regards to it, and sort of put people in a very difficult situation.
The thing I found most interesting about that interview was Steve Price, who was the host, was again saying that same commentary that said council should stop wasting their time on trying to do this, they should just get out there and take care of the things that council's meant to take care of. But again, this is one of the things we've got to take care of. So
That's right, you do.
we've got to make a decision to do something. Leaving it on the day is the uncontroversial, same old, just leave everything alone, and then you won't get involved in anything controversial. But again, this council, I've been very proud to be part of this council, because this council has shown itself on many occasions to say, we're prepared to make bold, courageous decisions when they're called for, not for the sake of making bold and courageous decisions, but when it's called for, we're prepared to make those decisions, even though sometimes that might cause some controversy or some criticism in the community. If it's the right thing to do, we'll take on board the feedback, but make the right decision for the community long term.
Okay. Also, at the council meeting on Thursday night, there was a discussion that took place in regards to the Maryvale solar farm. Now, this is a good little one, I think, because one part of the discussion was about the voluntary planning agreement that it looks as though maybe council seems to be getting sorted out here with Maryvale. Is this correct? Has there been some sort of a VPA established?
Almost. So it's an interesting one.
Okay.
What
does this mean, almost? What are we talking about here?
One of the issues that you are well and truly aware of is that we have problems getting VPAs because they're not compulsory. So voluntary planning agreements are not compulsory. And for whatever reason, as we've discussed before, we seem to have more luck with, and luck's not the right word because we do work hard at them, but more success with wind farms than we do with solar farms. Don't know why. I've mentioned it before. In Queensland, it seems to be the opposite. I've talked to some mayors up there and they said, solar farms are great. We get good planning agreements signed up with them, but those wind farms, we just don't seem to get anywhere with them. So it does come down to those individual states, individual proponents, good, bad, indifferent. So it is a bit frustrating. With the Maryvale solar farm, this is one where we went and spoke to them, and as we do with all of them, and say, here's our framework that we've developed. 1.5% is what we would like to have, please, if that's okay with you, because we've got no power to make you pay it.
Yeah. But of course, there's no federal support with this right now, or state support.
Or state support, that's right. And we are, I would argue, leading or part of the leading group of councils leading the nation in trying to get this framework adopted or accepted or being the standard, the norm. Yeah. And we're having some success with that. Most solar farms, in fact, I think all solar farms, until recently we've gotten some success, have basically said, sure thing, but we're going to pay you nothing. So we've got solar farms in our community that pay nothing. We've got some wind farms that do pay us something. Now, this one we went okay with. We asked for 1.5%. We got 0.73%. So about half, roughly.
Yep. So this is what they've come back to you with.
We went through a negotiation phase. Here's what we like. You're dreaming. Yes, please. Back and forth. And in the end, they said, okay, we'll pay this amount. And there were certain amounts set out in certain conditions, but basically it worked out to be 0.73%. That's still got to be resolved by council because those discussions happen outside the framework, if you like. And so, great, let's bring it back to council. So that was brought back to council. And there was a bit of discussion, and one of the councillors said, well, I'm not happy with this. I'm going to vote against that. And in the discussions there, I actually said, well, sure, you can vote against it, but that means you're voting against taking any money from a solar farm, which doesn't make sense. You're voting against taking 0.73%, which was still money. So anyone looking at that would say, why do these councillors vote against taking money from a solar farm? Why would you possibly vote against that? And I said, you'd be better off amending it to see if we can keep working on the 1.5% or whatever number you want. So when it was in the throes of the debate, this councillor moved the idea of changing it and saying, no, we reject the offer, the negotiated offer from the Maryvale solar farm, and we want to stick to a 1.5%. That's the framework we've adopted. That's the policy we've got. That's what we've talked to every proponent about, and that's where we've had success with other proponents. Why is this proponent allowed to get away with less than 1.5%? So in the end, that was amended, that was discussed at length amongst the council group. There was a fear from some councillors that if we go back to this particular solar farm, we say we take your offer of 0.73 and we'll counter it with 1.5, they might say, okay, you get zero. That's right, which they could do.
Absolutely.
Because they would satisfy the condition they need to have had discussions with the local council.
That's right. Yeah.
So there was a risk of that, a lot of discussion later. We voted in favour of going back and saying we reject your 0.73, we would like 1.5%. I'm interested to know how this is going to play out.
Yeah.
Because the decision of council was the right decision. We've got a policy that says 1.5%, so we should get that 1.5%. So go back to the proponent. Let's see how we go with that. I don't think we'll get 0. I think worst case scenarios, they might come back and say, no, sorry, 0.73 is as high as we're going to go. Take that or leave it. And in which case we take it, obviously. 0.73 is better than 0. But I like the signalling from this council around this to basically say, no, we've got a framework in place. We've got a framework in place because we're serious about this. That's a reasonable sum of money to pay to the community, to the local council, onto the community. So let's go forward with that. So stay tuned to see how we go with this one.
It certainly sounds like an interesting sort of situation right now. Tell me, from the point of view of council, let's just see, I suppose, what's the best way of putting this? As a council, can we stop any of these developments, first and foremost? And from the point of view of what power do we have as the ace in our deck to turn around and to try to say to a group like Maryvale here, to say to them, look, Maryvale, council's decided the fact that, or Dubbo Regional Council decided, no, we want 1.5% with the VPA. If you don't do it, this is what's going to happen. Is there anything in our Mary Poppins bag of tricks that we can pull out now to turn around and to have something there that we can actually stand by to say to them, no, look, this is our next step?
So the best we could do is we could say, if you don't pay the 1.5%, we won't like you very much.
So that's really it.
We have 0 power in the planning process.
Right.
It goes through the Department of Planning, the state government. It goes through them. They're the consent authority. The state government is the consent authority. So there's no objections we can make to this consent authority? The fact that, look, this is what we need as a community here. This is something that we feel very passionate about. We've had success in the past with wind farms in regards to this. We're looking now at the game with the solar. We want something back as a community across the board for all of these different operations. If you back us now on this, then, this will be successful. Community may even start to, those who may object to it may start to want to jump in and go, hey, listen, this sounds pretty good. We can actually get something quite concrete out of this right now. So we could make lots of objections, lots of noise to the state government, say we need some money out of this one. And the state government, the Department of Planning would say, let's look at the legislation. Oh, the legislation says something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing here, they've had a discussion about a community benefits fund. Have they had that? Yes, they have. Okay, they've satisfied that. So the Department of Planning with the current legislation, I suspect, would not even have the power to say no until you go and pay some money to the local council.
So that now becomes a federal government issue to change the legislation?
No, it would be the state government to change the legislation.
So this is based on state government now, is that right?
That's correct. Now, the federal government doesn't, or is not responsible for planning in terms of this process that we're talking about. The federal government could do something along the lines of some guidelines, for example, and say to all the states, here are some guidelines we strongly recommend that you implement in your local planning policies, because basically this planning that's happening for these various renewable projects across the nation are typically going through some form of state planning. Some go to council. It's a very small project that might go to council, but typically they're going through a state government for those planning approvals. So the federal government can't say you must put a 1.5% planning agreement as part of the process of the cost of doing business.
But the state government has that power if they make a change to legislation.
Correct. The state government can change legislation to say there are certain costs with doing business, certain costs with the planning process. Oh, one of those costs is now a voluntary planning agreement.
So they've point blankly refused to support any of this at any point in time. Is that correct?
I suspect there'll be some more action we'll see from the state government around this. And I don't know if they'll go as far as legislation. They could, but they may go as far as saying we're putting some strongly recommended guidelines in place. We're putting some amounts in place because, again, the amount we've come up with is 1.5%.
Yeah.
We've shared that with as many people as possible to say we think this is reasonable. But there's nothing from the state government in any of the legislation to say 1.5%. But they may well, just because we've been making representations, I suspect there may be some at least guidelines coming out soon-ish that say there's an expectation that you should pay this. Again, they could change the legislation, but that's not happening at this stage for whatever reason, I'm not sure. But it'd be nice to see. My ideal objective would be the federal government to put some guidelines in place and say, here is an expectation for renewable projects, and then the state governments across the land adopt those guidelines so that everyone's playing in the same playing field. And any proponent that wants to develop renewables in this nation knows the rules are the same in Queensland and New South Wales and wherever they might want to do it, they're going to have to pay some money to the local community.
Oh, look, 100%. I think it's exactly the way we need to go. Now, there are 4 renewable energy zones. Is that right in New South Wales?
5 reses across the state.
5 reses now? Okay.
Yep. Don't ask me to name the 5 reses.
That's all right. Do you know if any of these other reses are trying in their own way to get VPAs going?
We are the most advanced of the reses at the moment, so we certainly are having more of these discussions, and we've got more of the proponents at a closer stage of getting to the point of starting construction, and some have started construction. So we're certainly more advanced, but in discussions with other councils in other areas, certainly that's why we've been sharing our 1.5% framework. Certainly the framework that's there, many other councils are saying, well, that seems reasonable. And if you're getting some success in the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone, well, maybe we should try that as well, because you might find there'll be similar proponents developing in some of those other areas. And if everyone just says 1.5% is what we expect, hopefully it gets to the stage where the proponents just say, okay, it seems like to do business, we've got to add 1.5% to our cost of doing business. That's fair and reasonable. Let's all work on that.
And the state government changed legislation to support all the councils who are in the red zones there to actually get this stuff happening.
And I would say further than that, not just the ones that are in reses, any renewable projects, put legislation in place to support that.
I agree. Now, speaking of money, nice little segue. We like to talk about money. It's always a good thing. This one's a little bit different, though. We're talking here about, this is again from a council meeting resolution that was passed, interest-free loan for Macquarie Homestay. Now, Macquarie Homestay, for all those people out there, I think most people know about Macquarie Homestay, a fabulous operation up there, set up there up near Lord's Hospital, where people go and stay now who are looking for, who are going into the hospital for their care, and they need somewhere to stay, and Macquarie Homestay has been set up there for them, and a fabulous operation. It's a lot of volunteer people like South Dubbo Rotary, I know, have been heavily involved in getting this stuff set up, so it's been a real community-driven project, this. And it looks as though council's out there to support them as well. So talk us through it. What happened here in regards to the interest-free loan? Well,
council has been very supportive, and if we go back a long time ago, that parcel of land that they're on is a parcel of land that council certainly helped them secure back, and I'm guessing now from memory, maybe back around 2015 we're involved in that.
Yep. So that's council land there,
No, it's not council land. So it used to be part of the racecourse. If you remember, the racecourse used to be larger, the actual turf club track used to be larger, and Yarrandale Road used to go straight down past where Charles Sturt University and the senior campus are both located.
Yep.
And there was a change in that road, so it kind of curves around now.
Yeah, it does.
The race track had to be changed, so there was a slight change to the racetrack, so that was a big project. And so all of that land there, the turf club there, the racetrack there is all Crown land, and that was all part of where Macquarie Homestay sits, was all part of the turf club. Once the road was put in there, it almost cut off a little triangle that was just sitting
sort
there,
of vacant land.
A bit of an island.
Boy, how quickly I forget. Maybe just a sort of age thing kicking in here, but I completely forgot that was the case.
That's right. And so now you've got Tony McGrain Place, where you go down to Charles Sturt University in the senior campus. That's not a through road now. That's a dead end that ends at the senior campus. So essentially you've got the traffic that's the local school and university traffic, and then the other major traffic along Yarrandale Road goes to the roundabout, and then you go down Yarrandale Road, which curves around. So there was a parcel of land there that was Crown land. And so we said to the state government of the day, this Crown land would be perfect for you to sell to a organisation, I'm not sure if it's a company, how they set up it, basically an organisation, Macquarie Homestay. And that would be perfect for that. And we'd like you to sell that for $1 to Macquarie Homestay for them to develop these wonderful facilities on.
Yep.
That was an interesting process because it got to the point where the state government made decisions back then to say, we won't sell land for anything other than market valuation. So that meant that we were going to have to somehow get Macquarie Homestay to have enough money to pay for this land, which seemed like it really was hard to see what the Crown would do with that land. It was a little triangle there, hard to see how that would be utilised.
The interesting part about that discussion would have been that it was already being used and it sort of suddenly became sort of vacant and spare, but it's still... You know what I mean? Like it's already sort of been used there by a facility, a local-based facility there, and now they're expecting someone else to sort of come in for the reasons they're doing now, Macquarie Homestay, which is a fabulous community-based reason, and having them to expect to have to pay the land, which is already, I suggest, in my sort of vision here, it's already been paid for, it's already been done, it's already been part of the whole process of Crown already by people who've been using it.
Well, it was already used by the community in terms of the turf club there.
Absolutely.
So we had lots of negotiations. In the end, and I'm going back 9 years ago from memory, but approximately what we ended up negotiating with the state government was that, yes, Macquarie Homestay would buy that at the commercial rate that they wanted, but then we got a donation out of the Crown for approximately the same amount of money.
Oh, isn't that good?
So in the end...
Oh, see, okay. That's all right then. So my cynical nature of the state government on that one, I can pull back a bit on that one.
That's right. So in the end, Macquarie Homestay secured that land. So that's now owned not by council, not by the Crown. That's owned by Macquarie Homestay, so they can continue to develop on there. And they approached council. We had a meeting with them maybe a month ago, maybe sometime in that vicinity, maybe a little bit longer, basically where they said, we have got money they've got coming in from various fundraising activities. They've got some money that's coming in from various grants they've received over time. But they had a minor issue where an extra $100,000 would allow them to essentially use one of the buildings they're using as an office now for accommodation and have an interim office, which would basically increase their accommodation by 2. Now, the issue here is that there are people that are turned away almost every day from Macquarie Homestay. Yeah. They are in the building, or that drives past will see a large build going on there. And again, as they keep fundraising, as they keep getting grant applications, they will keep building. There's a lot of land there for them to keep building on. But this $100,000 would make a difference in the short term. So that was considered by council on Thursday night. Now, council has had a history of giving loans of around that amount to various community groups, sporting organisations, that type of thing, for something that is good for the community, and then let them pay that back.
Well, we had the discussion earlier in the year, didn't we, about Macquarie Conservatorium?
Well, that was different. That was a proposal to possibly give them a $100,000 loan.
So it never actually happened, though, did it?
No, and so that one was a committee recommendation through to the council meeting. In the end, when it got to council, the recommendation was changed, and it was to give them free rent on a facility. Yeah, that's right. So,
but there was a discussion with the community about what we can do to support. Yeah,
that's right. And that was actually interesting, because the initial proposal was a $100,000 interest-free loan, say over 5 years. So there's a small cost to the community in foregone interest. But then councils made the decision back then to go with a free rent on a council-owned building. So it might have been somewhere in the vicinity of $60,000 contribution to Macquarie Conservatorium per year for at least the first 5 years, and have a look at it again then after that. So there would have been a cost to council on doing that. In the end, Macquarie Conservatorium decided not to go ahead with that offer of a peppercorn lease on that particular building. So in this case, there have been other examples, though, where we've given a $100,000 interest-free loan. From our perspective, from a council perspective, you're not losing $100,000 because they're paying it back. You're only losing the interest on the money you would have if that was invested.
Which would be what?
Well, we approximated, in this scenario, about $11,000 over the 5 years.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, because, again, they've got to pay it back, so it's not $100,000.
$1,000 a year towards a wonderful project.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that's where it ended up with, again, debate, discussion around the table. There was discussion about whether or not this was council's responsibility to pay for this, and a whole range of different opinions put forward. But in the end, it was deemed that this was a good enough item to go forward with, and so council resolved to lend Macquarie Homestay $100,000. They'll pay that back over 5 years with no interest payable on that.
I think it's a fabulous idea. Well done. When I was a young bloke growing up, Matt, there was a lady who used to live up the street, and we used to refer to her as the cat lady. I don't know how many cats she had, but there was a hell lot of cats. And every year the numbers just seem to increase, and particularly around the breeding season, the numbers just seem to get larger and larger. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if she had maybe 50 or 60 cats in that house. I may be exaggerating, I don't know. I never had a chance to stop and talk to the cat lady about how many cats she ever had. But I do know that as part of the discussion here at the council meeting on Thursday night, the housing of pets and the number of pets maybe that are allowed in anyone's dwelling in an urban setting was discussed. What was the reason for the discussion, and what had come up with? So
are you sure you called that particular person Cat Lady, or was she called Catwoman?
Well, Catwoman, of course, through the old Batman days, but I very distinctly remember, we were kids, there was probably a few other choice words that was thrown around in regards to the poor old cat lady. She was probably a lovely lady. I'd have never really got a chance to meet her, sort of thing. There's always that one sort of mysterious old lady that lives in the street, isn't there, sort of thing. So,
and you wouldn't want to knock on a door and say,
"Oh no, God,
how
no,
many cats have you got?"
Absolutely. Be hit with the evil eye or something.
It was interesting. I was actually down in Wellington at an event, at a senior citizens event recently, and when I go to those type of events, I might do some poetry for them. I might just talk to them in general, but I'll also say any questions. And someone in that audience actually said there was one of their neighbours, they had too many dogs there in this particular scenario, and so could we get the ranger to come and sort them out? And I said, well, no, there is no rule on the number of dogs. And the lady was a bit flabbergasted, going, what? There should be some rule, some condition about how many.
So you can have as many as you want.
Well, obviously, it's a bit of an issue in Wellington because one of our Wellington councillors brought forward a question on notice to our council meeting on Thursday night.
Right.
And the question was essentially, what are the regulatory limits on the housing of pet animals, such as dogs and cats, on an individual residential property in the urban areas of the Dubbo Regional Council local government area?
Yep.
And so the use of questions on notice, which I think councillors are using quite well, is if you've got an issue that you want to get a formal response and be able to say, here's a formal response in a council meeting, have it discussed in the wider community, but also be able to say to people, here is the formal black and white, absolutely factual response to that, rather than just, when this lady asked me, I just said no, and I'm not sure she absolutely believed me, but she wasn't that happy with the answer. So one of the councillors brought forward that particular question, and so the answer came back in the formal response in the council business papers. There is no legislation empowering councils, and this is in this state only we're talking about, no legislation to empower councils to place any regulatory limits on the number of pet animals, such as cats or dogs, typically referred to as companion animals.
Right.
And that's on an individual urban residential property. Now, that's not for people that are registered as breeders, for example, so there are some exceptions to that. But in general, if you've got 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 cats or dogs, that's okay, but there is a limit in terms of the care. So there's no limit in an outright number. There's not, you've got over 3, that's not allowed, but you could have 1 cat or dog and a ranger could come along and inspect that and say, this animal is not being looked after properly, and so that would be an issue.
Yeah.
You could have 10 and they're looked after perfectly, that's
No
fine.
issues.
You could have 1 not looked after properly, and that would be an issue. So there's no outright limit on the numbers, but you do have to, which kind of makes sense, do have to look after them in a reasonable way. They need to be cared for reasonably.
It's actually, it's interesting that you sort of you brought up something that I didn't actually realise with council, that you can actually just put forward a question there to get a formal response. So there was no motion put forward in regards. This didn't require any motions. It was just basically looking for a clarification.
That's right. It's called questions on notice.
Okay.
And I think this council has gotten better over time, because I think in the early days, as councils were learning things that they could do, sometimes they might have brought a notice of motion forward that might have said, I would ask the CEO to give me a report on the limit to the number of cats and dogs allowed. And then the next month, because the CEO and the staff are very good at following resolutions of council, the next month they'd bring back a report that would say, here is the limits, or here are the limits in a report. But as we went along, and there's obviously lots of education as you start with council, and again, the fact that there are 9 councils on this council that have never been on Dubbo Regional Council before, then as council learned, they learned that questions on notice is something you can do. So you submit it like a notice of motion, but you get the formal response there. There's no need to be any action taken. It's better from a staff efficiency perspective, and you get your answer back in a quicker time frame. So it's a good tool to use. The other one I just want to mention is some other states do have limits. So, for example, in Queensland, they have legislation in place that restricts people to 2 dogs and 3 cats on a residential property.
Is that right? Okay,
Yeah.
so that's interesting.
And so sometimes people say, I know, there's a limit. You can only have 2 dogs in your property, because my mate, he said he got in
lives up in
trouble with
Brisbane.
3. That's right. They might necessarily think about where it is, or they might have read it, get ready for it. They might have read it on social media.
Oh, yeah, God forbid.
And
yes.
that's obviously the gospel truth.
Yeah.
So someone might have been in trouble or been restricted from having more than 2 dogs, and that might have been the case, but they might have been in Queensland. So again, this is where the states around the nation have different rules sometimes for different things. You wouldn't think that'd be such a big issue to have different rules in place for the number of cats and dogs you can have in your house in different states, but obviously it is, and I can't tell you all the other states what their rules are as well.
Yeah. Here's a fast little point, just to finish up on. Rudyard Kipling wrote a poem here called The Power of the Dog. All right, so when you get a chance, have a look up there on The Power of the Dog. Here's a quick little story for the listeners out there. Rudyard Kipling never had any children, but he loved dogs. He lived with about 20 or 30 dogs in his house, apparently. All through his life, he always lived with heaps of dogs. So this is in the middle of London, I suppose, this sort of stuff, and he always had heaps of dogs living in his place, 20 or 30. He loved animals, thus think of the whole story there of The Jungle Book and the boy who talks to the animals. Even weird and wonderful people can still be brilliant in life with their dogs and animals and pets in life.
Good. So
to the poor old cat lady out there who I just offended earlier on, I'm sure you may well have gone out there and done something incredibly important in your life and been a wonderful lady, just like Rudyard Kipling was, an incredible, well, I say poet and writer as well.
Excellent.
All right, now this next little one, Matt. This has become a little bit of a hot topic of discussion. The smart water meters. Now, the smart water meters, I'm going to have to sort of go back here and think about this for a little bit, because this was something that's been, over the course of time, been implemented throughout Dubbo, where Dubbo Regional Council has been putting in these smart water meters across the board, which apparently there's been some failures with them. And what's happened is this is certainly what I'm picking up and reading through the media and what I saw on TV there recently as well, is that some people are saying that when they're getting their rates notice and the water meter comes through, and it sort of says that there's actually using an estimate from last year's water usage, and the smart water meters, being so smart, aren't really so smart after all and have failed. What's happened?
I'm going to give you a statement here because it's a very formal process we're going through this. So I'm going to actually read a statement rather than give you a variety of information on this.
Right.
And this is basically all I can say on this.
Is there a reason why you have to use a formal statement for this?
There is,
okay.
Yes.
All right, okay.
So council is aware of some water meters in the Dubbo LGA that are not currently recording water usage.
Right.
Council is working with our water meter suppliers to rectify the issue. Yes. You will be billed based on the usage from a corresponding billing period. If your previous instalment showed a $0 charge, you'll not be charged differently for that period. Your current bill is based on the usage from a corresponding period.
Yep.
This is the only bill you will receive for this usage period. You're being billed based on the usage from a corresponding period. Under the Local Government General Regulation 2021, Section 158, Council are able to estimate based on the usage from a corresponding period. Applications can be submitted for review. They need to be in writing to council@dubbo.nsw.gov.au.
That's a very formal response. Very, very formal for you. Okay, I'll see if I can ask you a few questions. We'll see where we go with this in regards to it. I suppose first and foremost, have some of these water meters failed?
Yes, Council is aware of some water meters in the Dubbo LGA that are not currently recording water usage.
Okay. Is it a lot or is it just some?
Council is aware of some water meters.
I'm going to feel there's a bit of legal sort of stuff coming in the background of all of this, but I understand, though, from your position, you've obviously been, thrown in a bit of a difficult situation here. I know you probably want to say a lot more, but you probably can't, for obvious reason, I suggest. Then, okay, from that point of view then, if I'm a resident right now, and if I feel as though the fact that, my bills come forward here and it says the fact that it's used last year's readings and it appears that my smart water meter has failed, last year I used a hell of a lot of water and for lots of reasons. I may have had all the kids home for over that hot summer or whatever, or this time of this period of the year, they might have been all back and they all suddenly left the water on for God knows how long. I might have put in some rainwater tanks since. I might have, adjusted my flow because I didn't want to have that sort of bill again. And all of a sudden I got the same bill. What can I do?
Applications can be submitted for review, but they need to be in writing and they'd be submitted to council@dubbo.nsw.gov.au.
Okay, so I need to now, so from that point of view, all right, so there's no one I can speak to, but I can write away to that.
Correct.
Okay, so I need to get probably my paperwork together and maybe sort of have evidence to show the fact that the current bill is too expensive and it doesn't sort of truly replicate what I've probably done. But I'd imagine I would need to have evidence to support that. Otherwise, any Tom, Dick and Harry could probably go forward and say, oh, no, that's wrong because this year I did all of these things.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Good talking to you, Matt. That was great. Hopefully something I'm sure you give me a more of your normal answers on because I know you don't live too far from these areas. So Tamworth Street. Now there's been a lot of work being done. We'll start with Tamworth Street and then we'll move on to Darling Street upgrades. But
it's the same. It's the intersection Tamworth.
Oh,
and Darling.
okay. Sorry. All right. I thought we were going to look sort of separately. That's okay. So we're talking about the Tamworth Street, Darling Street upgrade. So this must be in regards to the water main that's been happening down there.
That's right.
Because that's, as a kid, I lived on that corner down there. So I would have had a lot more information probably 30 years ago. I could probably tell you about, because I probably would have stood there and watched all this happen, but it's been a long time since I've lived in that house. But talk us through it. So what's happened? Why have we had to sort of change the main water main down there?
Well, you would have seen, if anyone drove around that area, they would have seen roadworks going on. That's been going on for some time down there. And basically there's a major water main intersection actually of water there that's been worked on. The old one, and I saw some pictures of the old one, old cast iron, it looked like there, 1942 that was installed in there.
Cast iron?
Yeah.
Imagine that.
That's right.
They were the days when you could just sort of lay cast iron down. It probably must have cost you too much.
Yeah, so basically ageing water mains, they need to be upgraded. So that's on that roundabout. So lots of work around there that's been going on. And so essentially that's been replaced now. And even the new component that went in there was 3.5 tonnes. So it was nice and painted.
Was it cast iron as well?
Oh, I don't think it's cast iron anymore.
I was going to say, that's pretty sure those days are gone.
Yeah, so essentially it's something that you've got lots of work being going on there, people going, what's going on there? I wonder what's happening with that there. This is one of those things that over time we'll see more and more of our various pipes in the ground replaced, because a lot of these pipes are getting to that stage where they're pretty old, maybe 100 years or more for some of these various pipes. But the mains are obviously the main issue there, and people might even notice sometimes they've got some part of their road might be dug up and there'll be a new main put in. And I talked to someone that had that happen recently, and they said that they've actually noticed that the water seems to be clearer coming out of their tap already. Now, I found that interesting because I wouldn't have thought that the old
That's
mains,
a bit scary.
yeah, the old mains were that bad that it was dirty water.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just, I've looked at it and now I know it's been upgraded. It should be cleaner. But in essence, there have been a number of upgrades been occurring, and that's something that we do continually. We don't normally create a song and dance about it. It's just one of those things we do. There's no ribbons to be cut. It's not sexy and exciting, but it's just that ongoing maintenance of all of our infrastructure, which is a real challenge for us.
Is that a planning sort of thing? Like, you passed the budget there, or the last council meeting prior to this one. Is that part of what gets budgeted in each year as regards sort of planned upgrades of things like water mains? Yeah,
absolutely right. And more than that, it's looking at not what we'll do next year. It's 5 years, 10 years. You've got these long-term replacement schedules. It's a bit of a master plan in regards to changeover, these sort of things. Yeah, that's right. And every now and again, you'll have something happen where you'll have a water main burst or you have some other interruption, and so you've got to react to those quickly. But generally, what you're doing with this maintenance is trying to stop some of those things happening. So when people see lots of roadworks happening and some of the holes that were dug there, I know I drove past there a couple of times and you could just see the hole and go, wow, that's pretty deep. So it's pretty serious work, and you're digging up roadways, so it's not easy. It's not just dig a little hole and replace that little pipe down there. It's, as I said, a 3.5 tonne device is the item that was the main part that was replaced there. But you've got to dig down, get around that, all the rest of it. And meanwhile,
imagine trying to shift that like 1/4 inch once it's set in place.
That's right. Just
sorry, Jeff, mate, we're just out by 1/4 inch. Mate, that thing's 3.5 tonnes, brother.
That's right. And more to the point, you're still trying to make sure you're delivering water to residents around this time. Now, sometimes we'll drop some letters in mailbox and say your water will be cut off from 8 a.m. tomorrow till midday or whatever it might be. Yeah. So you'll sometimes get those notifications, but more often than not, we're trying to keep that water flowing through. And you've got stop valves around all the different mains, etc. You've got stop valves where you can stop and start it, or sometimes redirect it from a different area. But sometimes we just have to cut it off there. So people that are around that area, if they've seen that work going on, they've probably been aware of it because they might have had some roadworks there, or they might have seen, sometimes you'll get some dirty water come through, you turn the tap on, it's dirty that comes out, where they might have replaced it, and that might have
sort of flushing the valves almost.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Might have unsettled things, or might have got a bit of dirt in there. So you turn on, let it run for a little while, and then you can basically keep using it as normal.
So it's all finished now? It's all done?
I don't think it's all done, but the majority, the major part of that's been done. There's still some work there, and even just the roadway, there's still some tidy up work to be done there. And
while I mentioned Tamworth Street at the start, Tamworth Street's all finished? The roadworks up there, that's all done now?
It's looking good up there now, isn't it?
It's great.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I want to get a skateboard out and go on there now.
Roll back the clock. There it goes. Ladies and gentlemen, Sunday afternoon, 4 o'clock, Matt's going to go on the skateboard up there on Tamworth Street. Old Dubbo Jail. Hey, one of Dubbo's finest tourist attractions. We're just going to host the Dubbo Community Sleepout. It's always a big event. It always happens in winter. I don't know why they make it summer, personally.
I think you're around at this part of the time, the end of August we're talking about, so I think you're lacking excuses, aren't you?
I'm just trying to think. I do have something on that weekend. Not sure what weekend it is, but I'm sure I've got something.
Friday, 30th of August is when we're doing it.
Yeah, that date for some reason is just bouncing in my head.
It's a lot of fun.
I'm taking your word for it. I remember the time you told me about the last time you slept, and then you slept in the solitary confinement cell.
Yeah.
I don't know what you were thinking that night.
That was eerie. So
this was warm, probably.
I would encourage lots of people to
not
register.
to sleep there.
No, well, probably not there. But I'd encourage lots of people to register.
Yeah.
It's actually something that obviously you're trying to do is to show your support for people that are sleeping rough or homeless. You're raising some money for it as well, so these are all good things. But the experience itself, again, you're not really sleeping rough like other people are because, and I did actually talk about it last year when we were doing it. I've been home, I've had something to eat, I've gotten dressed in warm clothes, I've come down here with my sleeping bag and I'll sleep, and sure, it's a bit uncomfortable for the night, but tomorrow morning I'll go home and I'll have a nice warm shower and I'll have some breakfast in my house. So you're cheating a little bit. It's not really sleeping rough. Do you
get to take your own sort of doonas and things?
Take all those.
So
you
wear your beanies, your doonas, you can wrap yourself up like a little cocoon.
And it's actually quite fun there because you've got a group of people who are
pretty
sitting around.
social, I'd imagine.
Very social.
Do you get a little campfire going?
You get something like that going. Yeah. We don't want to be burning fires in the old Dubbo jail, of course, but you sit around and basically chat like it was a campfire. Yeah. So I think that's a nice experience for people anyway. A whole bunch of different people will be there and you sit around.
It's very safe. You're in a jail.
You're in a jail, that's right.
No one's coming in because they couldn't get out, so no one's going to get in.
No one's going to break in.
That's right, exactly.
And it is a bit eerie, and as you mentioned there, I did sleep in the solitary confinement cell. I actually had one of my kids home, and I said, you want to come and do this with me tonight? Oh, yeah, that sounds like fun. We're down there, and it was all good, and we were chatting away to the people and got to the stage it was time to go to bed. And I said, we're going to go and try that. And she said, are you sure about this? And you go in there during the daytime, you cannot see your hand in front of you. And it's also very quiet because they made the walls very thick, but also in the ceiling space, they've put a lot of insulation in there of some description so that when you're in there as a prisoner, your senses from a sight perspective were removed and your hearing was basically not removed. Your hearing was removed, but you couldn't hear things. So you really had sensory deprivation in there.
I lasted 10 seconds. There's no way in the world you get me in sleeping in there. I'm telling you now, I'd be like, nah.
It was eerie. One of the things that I
can't believe you did that.
Find though was the next morning I was talking to one of the. It was actually Councillor Matt Wright who also slept down there, and he said, "What about that clock tower every hour on the hour going off?" And I went, I didn't hear it.
I didn't hear it.
That's right. And so maybe the insulation in there was
so there's
good
method to your madness after all.
Yeah. But I'll try somewhere different this year. I was talking to someone the other day about it, and they said that they loved the idea of sleeping on one of the beds in the infirmary. And someone said, really? People
I've seen them too, yeah.
People have probably died
you love
there,
that idea?
probably been treated very poorly there. Do you really want to sleep on that? Anyway, they didn't in the end.
Arms getting chopped off. And thanks for that. That'd be great.
Basically, you can go and find somewhere to sleep that's safe to sleep in the jail. Make a contribution to the community with some fundraising.
I was going to say, it's a bit of a fundraiser as well? Or?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So Vinnie's is the charity that's fundraising for it, and they do help homeless people in our community, so it's a good charity to raise money for. But I would encourage people to go and register and basically be a part of it. If you just go and Google Vinnie's Community Sleepout, or probably even Vinnie's Sleepout in Dubbo, you would find the registration site there.
Yeah, nice. Hey, listen, while we're at the jail there, the forecourt area, we've got any updates on what's happening there? Like I know that seems to be a fairly permanent fixture there now, that AstroTurf. I feel like I should be playing a game of cricket on that. It looks good from the point of view, at least it looks nice and tidy, but I know we had a lot more plans for it.
Yeah, we've got more plans for it there, and it's really just going through some final approvals to get to the stage where we can start doing that work out there. It's called the Heritage Plaza, and that's some funding that we received from the state government. I'd probably even call it amalgamation money. It's going back almost that far. Maybe it wasn't technically amalgamation money, but it goes back to the last council, and basically we've just got to finish the planning processes and then get that happening.
Has it been held up again with a few things? Or?
Just some technicalities there. So it's frustrating from our perspective, but also as the council, as with any development, we've got to make sure we go through and tick all the right boxes and go through the planning, the regulatory planning approvals, we can't just say, hey, we're council, it'll all be okay. We've still got to go through the same process that any developer would have to do. So we'll get there. It's just a bit slower than I would like.
Well, they say the red tape's holding up, eh? Alrighty. Dubbo Regional Council leader in DA processing times. That was a headline I read there too.
Yeah, definitely.
Dubbo Regional Council, a leader in DA processing times.
Yep.
That should be something they should probably frame and put up there when you walk into the Dubbo Regional Council there. You know, you go in that nice little entrance foyer area. I think you should maybe put it up there, put it up a real big, put a few little extra neon lights over the top of it and make it shine. That is something really, we should be proud of that.
Yeah, we should be.
Absolutely, it's fabulous.
Right. And people often say, oh, our DA took too long. Why is it being held up in council? And sometimes they say that because for them as an individual, it's taking longer than they'd like it to take. And I understand that fully. And so our job is to make sure we go through the correct processes and make sure we assess any development applications correctly, because we want to make sure we get the right outcome. But obviously you want to do that in the most efficient way possible, having the right number of staff, having the staff with the right qualifications, having the skills, the experience, all the rest of it, all helps in that. But we talked briefly last week about the league table, and this is really just looking now at councils that are similar sort of size, processing similar numbers of DAs, similar sort of volume to what we're doing here. And when you look at that, for example, we averaged 55 growth days for processing and determining DAs in the financial year 2022-2023. And then in the year just finished, the 2023-2024 financial year, we reduced that down to 52 days.
How good's that? Because I know that we talked about this only recently, what the Minister for Local Government made some sort of call about how he wanted all councils to improve their DA approval times. And, you know, I can't even think, top of my head, it was around 100 or something days. And I know that we were so far in front of what he hoped the rest of the councils would get to. Already we're in that situation, already and so far advanced.
So let me give you a couple of other examples, and I'm not picking on other councils here, but there are a couple of other examples we had in the media release. So Albury City Council, for example, had average processing time of 102 days. Yeah. Tamworth Regional Council had an average processing time of 98 days. So in those two examples there, and we often do comparisons.
We're not picking on you, but we're calling you out here.
That's right. We often do comparisons against other Evo cities. So we've got the 7 Evo cities that we started way back in 2010 because they're similar cities to us.
Good examples.
So our processing time is almost half of those two examples there. Now, when you look at this, we aren't processing just a few applications, 645 approved applications in the 2023-2024 financial year. So
it's like 2 a day.
It's a lot of applications, that's right. Yeah. And keep in mind that's 2 a day if they work 7 days a week.
That's right,
but,
yeah.
5 days a week, you've got 200 days, so it's more like 3 a day that you're processing. Some of them are small, some of them are large, but again, this is what the Minister wants us to all work on. Now, they did announce, and I'll give you some of those timeframes, they did announce that councils should be determining development applications within an average of 115 days.
Yeah, I knew it was something like that. There is. Yep.
That's right. So that's pretty good, but obviously there's a lot there that are doing it a lot slower than that. For the Minister to say, I want you to improve what's happening in 115 days, that's right. Yeah. And we go, 115, 52 days.
Yeah, we smashed it.
That time frame from the Minister, he wants the reduction in that time frame to continue on year by year to finally get to a target, a lower target in 2027. So not making it ridiculous for councils just to snap their fingers and jump to a small figure, but basically reduce that year on year. And by 2027, the Minister wants the target to be 85 days.
Can we just sort of just put up the V for victory sign right now? Number one, with a bullet, this is us. Hey, the thing about this that really impresses me is that with any business, you've got your core business stuff, isn't it, that we measure our success against. And for the Dubbo Regional Council, like any council, getting those DAs approved and getting them through in an efficient time frame must be one of those core business type of things that we focus on. Yeah, I'd be right in saying that.
It's a significant part of the community and a very important part of the community because so many other things rely on it. So, as a few examples, when we process a DA and we say, there you go, you've got your DA approved now, that developer can go and do that work, build the thing that he wants to build, whatever it might be. So straight away, you've got some activity. in the economy.
And there's confidence
You've got-
that you can come through. You know,
That's
other
right.
developers say, "Oh, well, go to Dubbo."
That's right. You've
You
got
get the stuff
confidence
through
in
there
there
really well.
But
They're
you've
really
got,
good.
You've got building now. Again, they're not all houses, but let's say it's a house. You've got a number of tradespeople that are engaged in that process. So the DA comes out of council, all these trades, that's generating money in the economy, and then we want to keep attracting people. People want to move to Dubbo. We want to keep attracting them, but they need somewhere to live. So when we have more DAs processed, when we have builders building those various residential or various facilities for people to live in, then people can move to Dubbo. So there are lots of things that hang off it. And I know in a previous council, one of the councillors said the health of the economy can be judged by how many buildings are going up. Now, that was an overarching statement by that particular council. I'm not saying that I agree or disagree, but the bottom line was that this
That's a nice
council...
broad statement. Yeah,
It is, but this council saw building as so important for the overall economy of the community because so many things hang off it.
They do.
And you go into some of the new development areas there, and I was taking some people around for a drive around one just recently, and I drove into one street where there were obviously a number of houses going up, and it was hard for us to get down the street, to snake down the street with all the
Is that all the tradies utes and
That's
that
right.
stuff? Right, yeah.
All those tradie utes, they're
great.
obviously earning money there. There's
Absolutely.
other things that hang off there. There are suppliers that are supplying those goods.
Yeah.
Not all of those might be local, but many of them are. So it is good. And again, as a core metric in your community, it's not such a bad one, is it?
Absolutely. It's a good one. Now, Merrill Memo time. End of term report. Now, this is something that I can relate to, being a teacher. Many a year have I sat down and had to do the end of term and end of year reports for many students. I didn't realise that councillors get an end of term report as well. So are you the teacher in this case? Are you the one who writes the report here?
Kind of, yeah. I think councillors generally write the report card with council staff.
Right.
And, of course, you know how much I love quoting the Local Government Act.
I do, and it's really come to my knowledge how much you really do love it.
And I'm going to quote it again because Section 428,
yes.
Part 2 of the Local Government Act 1993 says that the annual report in the year in which an ordinary election of councillors is to be held must also report as to the council's achievements in implementing the community strategic plan over the previous 4 years.
Yeah, the thing I love about that, you just had straight off the top of your head. You just knew it. There it was. It just rotated straight out there. That was brilliant.
Good. Now, in this scenario, we didn't have a council term of 4 years. We know that it was delayed. The election was delayed from 2020, September 2020, to September 2021. And then it was delayed again from September 2021 to December 2021.
Was this all that wonderful COVID timeframe?
Yeah, that's right. So it was twice delayed, if you like. And so that meant that this council term is really, in totality, will be 2 years and 9 months. But this end of term report is basically a 3-year report because you're really going from the 2021-2022 financial year to the 2023-2024 financial year.
Yep.
So you're really you're starting on the 1st July 2021, if you like. So essentially it's a 3-year report card. Normally it would be a 4-year report card. So in essence, it's this term of council. It's a little bit more than that because it goes back to the 1st July 2021 because our annual report each year is obviously on the financial year.
Yep.
The fact that council elections are 3 years into the financial year is just a minor inconvenience.
Is this something you then have to hand over to the local government minister or something like that? Or
The local government minister would see all the annual reports. I don't know whether the minister would read them all, but they certainly would go to the Office of Local Government. They are all aware of those and certainly the end of term report.
So they go and
as
file
well.
somewhere and
And file somewhere, yeah, that's right. Again, I just can't see the minister getting 128 annual reports and reading over those. If there was anything that needed to be investigated, looked at, they might refer to them then. But in essence, we've got our annual report that will still happen and that'll happen after the election. But this end of term report is not only a nice thing to do because we're reporting back to the community. You elected us 3 years ago, roughly. Here's how we went in that time frame. Here's what we delivered to the community over that time frame. So that seems nice, but again, the Local Government Act says that you need to do an end of term report.
Now, I've got an idea. We've pretty much exhausted our time frame for this podcast this week. How about we do this? How about next podcast we go through our end of term report? What do you reckon?
I want to do it now.
No,
So exciting.
No. I know, but time is getting upon us, and we have to finish up our podcast this week there, Matt, so we're going to have to move it on to next week.
So, well, I'll tell you what we did do. On Friday, we did do a public presentation of the end of term report.
So it is there available, but next podcast, I want to go through it with you in a little bit more fine-toothed detail.
Yeah, sure. So that's okay. I can live with that because it's probably something we can talk about in detail because this is really the end of term report. This is saying what's happened over the 3 years.
There's a lot to get through, I'm pretty sure.
And it was quite fascinating. We had 34 council meetings. When I was looking at what to present in the end of term report, I went back and looked at the minutes of all 34 of those council meetings, and you're quite fascinated when you're going and doing that, going, oh, that's right. That it was that really important thing that we were so focused on and debated at length, and decision made, you move on. So some of these things that you did over that time frame, you tend to forget about those. And even councillors on Friday when we did the end of term report, because they obviously were there and had a chance to speak as well, the ones that could make it.
Yep.
And even they talked about the fact that they'd forgotten about some of the things that had happened over that 3 years.
You know what I'm going to do next week? I'm going to be like a parent. You can be the teacher who's written the report. I'll be the parent who will scrutinise the report.
Good. Right, well, we'll do that next week. We could probably spend a good hour talking about the end of term report alone, and that would make this podcast way too long. So
I look forward to next week then.
I'll accept your direction.
Now, as alluding to, we're coming very much towards the end of our podcast this week. But of course, like always, we finish with the Limerick of the Week. So, what have you got for us?
I'm going to focus on pets this week.
Are you? With the cat lady?
You
got to do one about the cat lady for
I want to call a cat woman. Can I call a cat woman?
You go for your life. You can call a cat woman. That's fine.
So there were lots of different things that we discussed during the week, but I just thought it'd be nice to just do something a bit lighthearted on this one. So here we go with the Limerick of the Week. In Dubbo, no pet count exists. Good care's the key that persists. Cats and dogs bring them here with love and good cheer. A city where every pet fits.
Oh, see, me with my little dog Oreo, we fit right in as well. Well done, buddy. Well done. Well, folks, that wraps up again for Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Until next week, take care.
Straight from the Mayor's Mouth with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.